Good evening, dear friend, and welcome back to this hushed corner of the universe we call the Sleepy Professor. You found your way here again, perhaps after another long day when the world felt too quick, too bright, too demanding. Here, time moves differently. Here, we let curiosity unfold as slowly as morning mist, and we explore the wonders of our world at the pace of a gentle lullaby. Tonight, settle yourself somewhere comfortable, perhaps curled beneath your favorite blanket, or sinking into that chair that knows the shape of your tiredness. Let your shoulders drop just a little. Let your breathing find its own unhurried rhythm. Maybe you've kicked off your shoes and felt the relief of simply being still. Maybe you've dimmed the lights around you, creating your own little sanctuary of softness in a world that so often demands brightness and noise. Tonight, we're going on a journey that requires no hurry at all, for we're traveling into the deepest dreams of our planet itself, where sunlight has never dared to venture, where pressures would crush mountains, yet life finds its most creative ways to flourish. You might notice the soft light around you. Maybe it's the glow of a bedside lamp, or perhaps the last pale threads of evening light filtering through your window. Wherever you are in the world, whatever corner of night cradles you now, you're part of a quiet community scattered across the globe. Each of us listening in our own small sanctuary, yet joined together by the same sleepy story. In Tokyo, perhaps someone is drifting toward dreams, their day already surrendered to tomorrow. In London, another soul might be finding comfort in these gentle words as rain taps softly against the window. In Sao Paulo, another weary mind might be letting go of the day's concerns as the city's sounds fade into evening's embrace. In Mumbai, someone might be escaping the heat of the day into the cool comfort of rest. In Sydney, in New York, in small towns whose names we'll never know, we are all connected, not just by this story, but by something deeper. We all rest upon the same planet that holds oceans so vast and deep that they contain more mysteries than all the stars we can see on the clearest night. If these slow explorations bring you peace, a gentle touch of that like button helps this drowsy channel find others who need the same quiet refuge. If you've already joined our sleepy community by subscribing, your presence here fills me with the warmest gratitude. And if you're new to these gentle journeys into science, you're invited to stay to make yourself at home in this unhurried space where learning happens at the speed of a sleepy sigh. There's no test at the end, no need to remember every detail. Just let the words wash over you like gentle waves, carrying whatever knowledge they will, releasing whatever doesn't serve your rest. Now, a gentle warning, dear listener. I hope tonight's story helps guide you toward the softest dreams, but if it happens to keep you awake with wonder, at least you'll carry new knowledge with you into tomorrow's light. So let the outside world grow dim and distant. Let your muscles release their hold on the day's tension, starting perhaps with your jaw, which you might only now realize has been clenched. Let your tongue rest softly in your mouth. Let your eyes grow heavy, or close them entirely if that brings comfort. Let your mind settle like marine snow slowly drifting to the bottom of the deepest ocean trench. Our story is beginning. Have you ever wondered, as you lie in bed at night, about the secret world that exists beneath the gentle waves you might have watched at the beach? The ocean's surface seems so familiar, so welcoming, dancing with sunlight during the day, reflecting stars at night. Perhaps you remember standing at the edge of the sea, feeling the cool water lap at your ankles, watching waves roll in with their eternal rhythm. Perhaps you floated in ocean water, felt that unique buoyancy that's different from any lake or pool, but that shimmering surface is just the thinnest skin on something infinitely more mysterious and profound. Beneath those waves lies a realm that makes our deepest caves seem shallow, our darkest nights seem bright, our most extreme environments seem gentle and forgiving. The ocean is not simply deep, it is layered like the most intricate dream, with each level holding its own secrets, its own impossible creatures, its own delicate ecosystems that have never known the warmth of sunlight. Tonight, we'll descend through these layers together, slowly, peacefully, like falling asleep in reverse, discovering that the deeper we go, the more awake the ocean becomes with its own strange and beautiful forms of life. From the sun-dappled surface where dolphins play and seabirds dive, we'll drift downward through the twilight zone where colors begin to fade and mysterious lights begin to twinkle. We'll continue our gentle descent into the midnight zone where eternal darkness reigns, yet life glows with its own chemical fire. And finally we'll reach the abyss itself, where the pressure could crush submarines, yet creatures dance with impossible grace, and entire ecosystems bloom around volcanic vents like underwater gardens of fire. But we'll take our time, we'll let each layer reveal its secrets before moving to the next, like pages in the most peaceful bedtime story ever written. We'll pause where wonder stirs, linger where imagination finds comfort, because the story of the ocean's depths is not urgent. It has been unfolding for billions of years, and it will continue long after our own small dreams have faded into the vast dreaming of the sea itself. So close your eyes if you wish, or let them rest half open in the gentle light. Let your breathing deepen, drawing air down into the very bottom of your lungs, then releasing it slowly, as if you were teaching your body the rhythm of waves upon a shore. Feel yourself sinking, not just into comfort, but into the deepest parts of our blue planet, where every drop of water has its own story to tell, where pressure and darkness have created the most extraordinary theatre of life our world has ever known. The sunlit surface, where light and water dance together in perfect harmony. Let's begin our journey where most ocean stories start, at the surface, in what scientists call the epipelagic zone. Though I prefer to think of it simply as the sunlight zone, this is the ocean as most of us know it, stretching from the waves that lap at your feet on a beach day down to about 200 meters below the surface. A depth that, if you were to swim straight down, would take you deeper than most skyscrapers at all. Yet it's just the very beginning of the ocean's story. Picture yourself floating gently on your back in perfectly calm, warm water on the most peaceful day imaginable. The sun streams down through the crystal clear water, creating those lovely dancing patterns of light and shadow that seem to dance on an invisible underwater ceiling. You've probably seen these patterns if you've ever been in a pool, those wavering lines of light that move across the bottom, constantly shifting, never still. In the ocean, these patterns extend far deeper, creating a cathedral of moving light that reaches down toward the twilight zone below. This is photosynthesis happening all around you. Billions and billions of tiny plant-like organisms called phytoplankton, each one smaller than the period at the end of this sentence, all working together to transform sunlight into the very oxygen that life depends on. If you could shrink yourself down to microscopic size and float among these tiny organisms, you'd see an astonishing variety of forms, some like tiny spheres covered in intricate geometric patterns, others like miniature stars with arms radiating in perfect symmetry, still others like chains of beads strung together in delicate necklaces. Each one is a marvel of biological engineering, a tiny green factory powered entirely by sunlight. These microscopic gardeners of the sea are so small you can't see them individually, yet they are so numerous that they give the ocean its color, sometimes blue, sometimes green, sometimes that perfect turquoise that makes you want to dive right in. All of these colors come from these tiny floating plants, each one a perfect little solar panel converting the sun's energy into food, releasing oxygen as a gift to the rest of us. In fact, these tiny organisms produce more oxygen than all the rainforests on land combined. Every other breath you take comes from the work of these invisible architects of life. Think about that for a moment as you breathe in slowly. The oxygen filling your lungs right now might have been produced by a microscopic organism floating in the Pacific Ocean, or the Atlantic, or the Indian Ocean, released into the air and carried by winds halfway around the world to reach you in this quiet moment. The sunlight zone is warm and welcoming, at least near the surface. Temperatures here, can range from the tropical warmth of bath water near the equator, sometimes reaching 30 degrees Celsius, warmer than most swimming pools, to the brisk chill of a mountain lake in polar regions, but always warmed by the sun's rays penetrating down through the water. This warmth creates currents and circulation patterns like the ocean taking slow, deep breaths, moving water around the globe in currents that have been flowing for millions of years. The Gulf Stream, for instance, carries warm water from the Caribbean all the way to northern Europe, making cities like London and Stockholm warm enough to be habitable despite their northern latitude. Without this river in the ocean, for that's truly what it is, a river of warm water flowing through the cooler Atlantic, much of Europe would experience winters as harsh as those in Alaska or Siberia. These currents are like the ocean's bloodstream, carrying heat, nutrients and life from one part of the planet to another, connecting tropical coral reefs to Arctic ice sheets in an endless circulation of energy and matter. And oh, the life that flourishes here! If the ocean depths are mysterious and strange, the sunlight zone is familiar and joyful. Schools of fish that shimmer like living silver, their scales catching and reflecting the filtered sunlight as they move in perfect synchronization, as if they were all listening to the same underwater music. Some of these schools can contain millions of individual fish, moving as one organism, creating underwater murmurations that rival any aerial display by starlings. How do they coordinate so perfectly, never colliding, always moving together? Scientists have discovered that each fish responds to the movements of its 7 nearest neighbors, creating a mathematical dance of extraordinary complexity that emerges from simple rules followed by millions of individuals. Sea turtles glide through the water with the patience of ancient wisdom, their flippers moving in slow motion, each stroke carrying them forward on journeys that span entire ocean basins. These remarkable navigators return to the exact beaches where they were born, sometimes after decades at sea, using magnetic fields and ocean currents as their compass, following paths their ancestors have traveled for millions of years. Imagine carrying within yourself an internal compass so precise that you could swim across an entire ocean and arrive at a specific beach thousands of miles away, a beach you haven't seen since you were a tiny hatchling scurrying across the sand toward the waves. This is the reality for sea turtles. These ancient mariners who have mastered the art of ocean navigation in ways we're only beginning to understand. Dolphins arc through the water with such joy and intelligence that watching them feels like witnessing pure happiness in motion. They communicate with clicks and whistles, play games that seem to serve no purpose other than fun, and sometimes, if you're very lucky and very quiet, they might swim close enough to look you in the eye with what can only be described as curiosity about you, the strange creature from above the waves. Scientists have discovered that dolphins have names for each other, unique whistle signatures that they use to call specific individuals, much like we use names to identify our friends and family. A mother dolphin will repeat her calf's signature whistle over and over, teaching the young one its name. Dolphins also seem to have a sense of self, passing the mirror test that suggests they recognize themselves as individuals, a trait shared by very few species on Earth. Jellyfish drift through this zone like living underwater clouds, their bodies so translucent they're almost invisible until the light catches them just right. They pulse through the water with a rhythm that seems to match the very heartbeat of the sea itself, slow, steady, eternal. Most are harmless, content to filter tiny morsels of food from the water, though they should be respected from a distance, like beautiful strangers in a peaceful dream. Some jellyfish have been drifting through the oceans for over 500 million years, making them older than trees, older than fish, older than almost all complex life on Earth. They existed before the first fish evolved, before plants colonized the land, before the first insects took flight. They are living fossils, their body plan so successful that evolution has seen little need to change it across 500 million years. Seabirds dive into this zone from above, their bodies transformed in an instant from creatures of air to creatures of water. Pelicans fold their wings and plunge headfirst with surprising grace, their beaks designed perfectly for scooping up fish like living fishing nets. The impact of hitting the water at high speed would be painful for most birds, but pelicans have air sacs in their skull and breast that cushion the blow, acting like nature's airbags. Albatrosses, those magnificent wanderers, touch the surface briefly to feed before returning to their endless journeys across thousands of miles of open ocean. These master gliders can spend years at sea without ever touching land, sleeping while flying, riding the wind currents like aerial nomads. Some albatrosses have been tracked circling the entire Southern Ocean in just 46 days, flying at the edge of Antarctic storms, covering distances that would take a human months to traverse. The sunlight zone is where the ocean breathes. Here, waves are born from the interaction between wind and water, starting as tiny ripples that grow into the swells that travel across entire oceans, carrying energy from distant storms to far-off shores. These waves create the music of the sea, sometimes the gentle whisper of water against sand, sometimes the dramatic crash of surf against rocky cliffs, but always, always rhythmic, like a lullaby that has been playing since water first appeared on our planet. Each wave you see breaking on a beach began somewhere else, perhaps as a gentle breeze rippling across calm water, perhaps as a storm's fury whipping the ocean into mountainous swells. That wave has traveled, carrying energy across hundreds or thousands of miles, until finally it expends its energy on the shore, returning to stillness. Even the plant life here is magical in its simplicity. Long streamers of kelp, if we're in the right part of the ocean, sway back and forth with the currents like an underwater forest. These giant seaweeds can grow faster than bamboo, sometimes growing 2 feet in a single day, reaching from the seafloor up toward the light, creating 3-dimensional forests where fish can hide, sea otters can play, and thousands of smaller creatures can find homes among the swaying fronds. A single kelp forest can be home to over 1,000 different species, making these underwater groves as diverse as tropical rainforests. The kelp themselves are remarkable organisms, not plants at all, but giant algae that can grow to over 150 feet in length, creating canopies that shade the seafloor below and provide nursery grounds for countless young fish. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about the sunlight zone is how it connects to everything else. The oxygen produced by those tiny phytoplankton eventually finds its way into your lungs. The fish that swim here feed creatures in the deeper zones when they die and sink. The currents that flow through this zone carry warm water to distant shores, influencing weather patterns around the globe. In a very real sense, the sunlight zone of the ocean is what makes our entire planet habitable. Without this thin layer of productive oxygen-generating water, life as we know it could not exist on Earth. The water here exists in layers too, even within this bright surface zone. There's the mixed layer at the very top, where waves and wind keep everything stirred together, typically extending down about 50 to 200 meters, depending on the season and weather. Below that, temperature begins to drop more rapidly in what's called the seasonal thermocline, where the sun's warming influence starts to fade and the ocean begins its slow transition toward the deeper, colder layers below. This layering is crucial for marine life. It creates boundaries where nutrients can accumulate, where different communities of organisms can coexist in the same vertical column of water, separated by invisible walls of temperature and density. Microscopic life here follows rhythms as old as the planet itself. During the day, phytoplankton photosynthesize like tiny underwater plants. At night, they respire, using up oxygen just like the rest of us. This daily cycle of photosynthesis and respiration creates subtle changes in the ocean's chemistry that can be detected even from satellites in space, allowing scientists to monitor the health of these microscopic communities from hundreds of miles above. The ocean literally breathes, inhaling carbon dioxide during the day and exhaling oxygen, then reversing the process at night, a global metabolism that helps regulate the chemistry of our entire atmosphere. The sunlight zone is also where most of the ocean's carbon dioxide absorption happens. As phytoplankton photosynthesize, they pull CO2 from the water, which in turn pulls more CO2 from the atmosphere. When these tiny organisms die, they sink toward the depths, carrying carbon away from the atmosphere and storing it in the deep ocean for hundreds or thousands of years. This process, called the biological pump, helps regulate Earth's climate by removing excess carbon dioxide from the air. Without this mechanism, Earth's atmosphere would contain far more CO2, and our climate would be much warmer, perhaps too warm for human civilization to have developed. Coral reefs, those magnificent cities of the sea, thrive in the sunlight zone wherever the water is warm and clear. These are not plants, but colonies of tiny animals called polyps, each no bigger than a pencil eraser, working together to build structures that can be seen from space. The Great Barrier Reef, stretching for over 1,400 miles along the coast of Australia, is the largest living structure on Earth, larger than the Great Wall of China, visible to astronauts orbiting overhead. Each coral polyp is both an animal and a farmer, hosting microscopic algae within its tissues that photosynthesize and share their food with their coral host. This partnership between animal and plant is one of the most successful collaborations in nature, creating ecosystems that support roughly a quarter of all marine species, despite covering less than 1% of the ocean floor. As we prepare to descend deeper, take a moment to appreciate this bright, warm, familiar layer of the sea. It's only about 1% of the ocean's volume, yet it produces most of the oxygen we breathe and supports much of the life we recognize. It's the ocean's way of reaching up to touch the sky, of mixing the elements of air and water into something that nurtures life across the entire planet. The water temperature here can range from about 30 degrees Celsius in the tropics, warmer than most swimming pools, down to near freezing in polar regions. But even the cold water is warmed by comparison to what we'll find below. The sunlight that streams down here will grow dimmer as we descend, the colors gradually fading from the full spectrum of a rainbow to just blue and green, and finally to a deep, mysterious blue that seems to glow with its own inner light. Light itself behaves differently as we move deeper into even this surface zone. Red light is the first to disappear, absorbed by the water within the first few meters. This is why blood appears green underwater. The red wavelengths that normally give blood its color have been filtered out by the water. Orange follows, then yellow, leaving behind the blues and greens that give the ocean its characteristic color. This is why underwater photographers need special lights to capture the true colors of sea life without artificial illumination. Everything below about 10 meters appears in shades of blue and green, regardless of its actual color. A bright red fish that's dazzling near the surface becomes a dull gray or black just 20 meters down. The pressure here is gentle, just the familiar pressure of a swimming pool, plus a little more for each few meters we descend. At 10 meters down, the pressure is double what we experience at the surface. At 20 meters, it's triple. But this is still the gentle beginning of the ocean's pressure story. A pressure so mild that recreational scuba divers swim comfortably through these waters, exploring coral reefs and kelp forests with nothing more than a simple breathing apparatus. So let yourself float for just a moment longer in this imagined sunlight zone, feeling the warmth on your skin, the gentle motion of the waves, the sense of being held and supported by water that connects you to every other drop of water on our planet. Feel the life teeming around you, the fish, the plankton, the jellyfish, the dolphins, all of them going about their lives in this bright, warm, welcoming layer of the sea. Notice how your breathing has perhaps become slower, deeper, more rhythmic, matching the eternal rhythm of waves upon the shore. Soon we'll begin our descent, leaving the familiar sunlight behind, but will carry its warmth with us as we explore the deeper mysteries below. The journey into the ocean's depths is like the journey into sleep, leaving the bright, active world behind, and discovering that the deeper we go, the more magical and mysterious everything becomes. The twilight realm, where day begins to dream of night and light takes new forms. Now let us descend together, gently, peacefully, like sinking into the deepest, most comfortable sleep. We're leaving the bright world of the surface behind and entering the mesopelagic zone, the twilight zone of the ocean, stretching from about 200 meters down to 1,000 meters below the surface. If the sunlight zone was like floating in a bright, warm swimming pool, the twilight zone is like sinking into a peaceful evening where the last rays of sunlight fade into the first hints of mysterious darkness. Here, between 200 and 1,000 meters down, we find ourselves in a realm that most humans will never visit, yet it may contain more life than any other part of our planet. The pressure here is noticeable but not crushing, perhaps 10 to 100 times the pressure you feel at sea level, like wearing a very heavy blanket that presses gently but insistently from all directions. For every 10 meters we descend, the pressure increases by about 1 atmosphere, so at 200 meters, it's roughly 20 times the pressure at the surface, enough to compress air-filled spaces, but still manageable for the creatures adapted to live here. The temperature has dropped from the warmth of the surface to a cool 5 to 4 degrees Celsius, cold enough that you'd want a warm coat if you were visiting, but not so cold as to be unbearable. This temperature drop is part of the ocean's great thermal architecture, where warm surface water sits atop increasingly cold layers in what scientists call thermal stratification. The boundary between the warm surface layer and these cooler waters forms what's called a thermocline, a temperature barrier as real and important as any physical wall. Submarines can hide beneath this layer, using it to deflect sonar. Marine mammals must cross it every time they dive deep, feeling the temperature shift around them like passing through an invisible curtain. The most remarkable thing about the twilight zone is the light, or rather the way light behaves here. Sunlight still filters down from above, but it's no longer the bright, full-spectrum illumination of the surface. Red light has already been absorbed by the water above, then orange, then yellow, leaving only blues and greens to pierce the growing gloom. Looking up toward the surface from here would be like looking up through deep blue glass toward a distant memory of the sun. The brightness above becomes softer, more diffuse, like a fading dream of daylight. But looking down is even more mesmerizing because the twilight zone is where the ocean's own light show begins. This is where we first encounter bioluminescence, the magical ability of living creatures to create their own light through chemical reactions in their bodies. It's like discovering that the stars have decided to come down from the sky to live in the sea, twinkling and glowing in patterns so beautiful they seem choreographed by a master artist. Imagine floating in this blue-green twilight, and suddenly, all around you, tiny points of light begin to flicker on and off like the most delicate Christmas lights. These are not fires or electric bulbs, but living creatures, microscopic plankton and larger jellyfish, small fish and mysterious squid, all producing their own light through a process that is both completely natural and utterly magical. The chemistry behind bioluminescence involves a molecule called lucifer in reacting with the enzyme luciferase in the presence of oxygen, creating light with an efficiency that puts our best LED bulbs to shame. Nearly 100% of the energy in this reaction is converted to light, with almost no waste heat, something our technology cannot yet match. The creatures here have learned to paint with light in ways that would make any artist envious. Some fish have rows of light-producing organs along their sides, like portholes on a submarine, which they can turn on and off to communicate with potential mates or to confuse predators. Others have a single bright light, like a living headlamp, that they use to hunt for food in the eternal twilight. Still others have light organs beneath their eyes, illuminating their prey like a hunter with a flashlight. The patterns are as individual as fingerprints, allowing members of the same species to recognize each other in the vast blue darkness. Recent discoveries have revealed that the twilight zone may be home to more fish than all other parts of the ocean combined. New species are discovered here regularly, with recent expeditions finding hundreds of previously unknown creatures in every major survey. Many of these fish have evolved remarkable adaptations to the low light conditions, oversized eyes to capture what little light exists, or alternatively, no eyes at all, having evolved beyond the need for vision in favor of other senses. The twilight zone is also one of the least explored regions of our planet. We know more about the surface of Mars than we do about this vast middle layer of our own oceans. Every expedition here reveals new species, new behaviors, new ways that life has adapted to the unique conditions of permanent twilight. Scientists estimate that this zone may contain more fish than all other parts of the ocean combined, yet most of its inhabitants remain nameless and unstudied. Sound travels differently in the twilight zone than at the surface. The increasing density of the water, combined with the temperature gradients, creates acoustic layers that can channel sound waves across vast distances. Whales and dolphins that dive to these depths can communicate across hundreds of miles, their calls traveling along these sonic highways like messages on an underwater telegraph system. The ocean has its own sound channel, called the SOFAR channel, sound fixing and ranging, where sound can travel almost indefinitely, bouncing between temperature layers without losing strength. The twilight zone is also where we begin to see the effects of deep-sea gigantism, the tendency for creatures to grow much larger than their shallow water relatives. Giant siphonophores, enormous jellyfish, and squid that dwarf their surface cousins all make their home here. Scientists believe this gigantism may be an adaptation to the sparse food resources and cold temperatures, allowing creatures to store more energy and survive longer between meals. In an environment where your next meal might not arrive for weeks, a larger body can store more fat, more energy, providing a buffer against the lean times. The giant squid, legendary monster of sailors' tales, makes its home in the twilight zone. These magnificent creatures can grow to over 40 feet in length, with eyes the size of dinner plates, the largest eyes in the animal kingdom. Those enormous eyes are not just for show, they're perfectly adapted to detect the faint bioluminescence of their prey in the dim twilight waters. A giant squid's eye can detect a sperm whale, their primary predator, from over 400 feet away, giving them precious seconds to escape into the darkness. Jellies of extraordinary size and delicate beauty drift through this zone like living art installations. The lion's mane jellyfish, with tentacles that can extend over 100 feet, hunts with a deadly elegance, its stinging cells paralyzing small fish and plankton that brush against its flowing arms. Other jellies glow with their own light, pulsing through the water like slow-motion fireworks, their translucent bells revealing the intricate hydraulics of their simple but effective bodies. As we prepare to descend even deeper, take a moment to appreciate the remarkable balance of this twilight realm. It's neither fully lit nor completely dark, neither warm nor freezing cold, neither shallow enough to be familiar, nor deep enough to be completely alien. It's a zone of transition, where the ocean begins to reveal its deeper mysteries, while still maintaining some connection to the bright world above. Your breathing should be slow and steady now, perhaps matching the gentle pulse of those drifting jellies, in and out, steady as the currents themselves. In the twilight zone, we learn that the ocean's depths are not simply dark and empty, but are filled with their own forms of light and life. The bioluminescence we've discovered here is just the beginning, a gentle introduction to the ways that life has learned to create beauty and function in environments that seem impossibly challenging. As we continue our descent into even deeper waters, we'll find that this creativity only intensifies. that the ocean's ability to nurture life becomes more remarkable the deeper we go. Feel yourself sinking peacefully through this blue twilight, surrounded by creatures that glow like living stars, supported by water that has been compressed by the weight of the ocean above, yet remains gentle and welcoming. The twilight zone is the ocean's way of preparing us for the greater mysteries that await in the depths below, a gradual transition from the familiar into the extraordinary, from the sunlit into the sublime. Let your muscles grow even more relaxed as we prepare for the next stage of our journey. Perhaps your jaw has softened completely now, your tongue resting loose in your mouth. Perhaps your hands have uncurled, palms opened, fingers gentle. We're going deeper now, into realms where sunlight is just a memory, where creatures have evolved in ways that seem impossible, where the very definition of life expands to encompass forms we never imagined. The midnight zone, where darkness reigns yet life glows with its own fire. Now we descend further, leaving even the faint memory of sunlight behind. We're entering the bathypelagic zone, the midnight zone, stretching from 1,000 meters down to 4,000 meters below the surface. Here, in this vast realm that contains more volume than all the world's continents combined, darkness is absolute and eternal. No ray of sunlight has ever penetrated to these depths, not in all the billions of years the ocean has existed. The pressure here is extraordinary, 100 to 400 times the pressure at sea level. If you could feel this pressure as a human, it would be like having dozens of elephants standing on every square inch of your body. Yet the creatures here don't feel crushed because their bodies have no air spaces to compress, and the fluid in their tissues is at the same pressure as the water around them. They are creatures of pressure, as comfortable in this compressed realm as we are at sea level. The temperature has dropped further, to a constant 2 to 4 degrees Celsius, just above freezing, cold enough to make you numb within minutes if you were exposed to it. But this cold is actually a blessing for the creatures here, slowing their metabolism, allowing them to survive on the scarce food resources that drift down from above. In the midnight zone, life moves slowly, conserving every calorie, existing in a state of patient waiting. Here, bioluminescence is not just common, it's nearly universal. An estimated 90% of creatures in the midnight zone can produce their own light. The darkness is not empty but filled with a galaxy of living stars, each one telling its own story through patterns of light. Some flash in rapid sequences, like Morse code spelling out messages of courtship or warning. Others glow with a steady, eerie light, like underwater ghosts drifting through the void. Still others can produce brilliant flashes, like underwater lightning, designed to startle predators or illuminate prey. The anglerfish we met briefly in the twilight zone reaches its most bizarre forms here in the midnight zone. Female anglerfish are monstrous in appearance, with enormous mouths filled with translucent, needle-like teeth that point inward, ensuring that anything that enters can never escape. Their stomachs can expand to enormous size, allowing them to swallow prey larger than themselves, a necessary adaptation when food is so scarce that you can't afford to let any meal, no matter how large, pass you by. The anglerfish's lure, called an esker, contains bioluminescent bacteria that glow with a steady light, attracting curious prey in the absolute darkness. The relationship between the anglerfish and these bacteria is mutually beneficial. The bacteria get a safe home and steady nutrition, while the fish gets a living fishing lure that never needs batteries. It's a partnership millions of years old, refined through countless generations into something that works with perfect efficiency. But perhaps the strangest thing about deep-sea anglerfish is their reproductive strategy. We mentioned this briefly before, but in the midnight zone, it reaches its most extreme form. The males, when they find a female, bite onto her and never let go. Over time, his body fuses with hers at the cellular level. His blood vessels connect to hers. His body atrophies until he's nothing more than a pair of testes attached to her side, providing sperm on demand. Some females have been found with 6 or more males attached, like living ornaments. It's a solution to the most challenging dating problem in nature, finding a mate in the vastness of the midnight zone. The gulper eel is another creature that seems designed by imagination rather than evolution. Its mouth is enormous, comically, impossibly huge, while its body tapers to a thin, whip-like tail. It looks more like a living bag with teeth than a traditional fish. The gulper eel drifts through the darkness with its huge mouth open, hoping that some unfortunate creature will swim directly into it. When prey is scarce, you can't afford to chase. You simply wait, mouth open, hoping chance will bring food your way. The barley fish has evolved one of the most unusual solutions to hunting in the darkness. Its eyes are tubular, pointing upward through a transparent dome on its head, allowing it to watch for the silhouettes of prey swimming above against the faint light from distant surface waters. The fish's head is literally transparent, like a living submarine with a glass cockpit, its green eyes staring eternally upward. When it spots prey, it can rotate its eyes forward to track it as it moves in for the kill, a flexible viewing system that gives it a huge advantage in the lightless depths. Many fish in the midnight zone are black, not just dark, but the blackest black found anywhere in nature, absorbing up to 99.9% of light that hits them. This ultra-black coloration is created by specialized skin structures that trap light and prevent reflection, making these fish nearly invisible even when bioluminescent creatures illuminate the waters around them. It's the ultimate camouflage in an environment where even the faintest reflection might give away your position to a predator or alert prey to your presence. The viperfish is aptly named, with fangs so long they can't close their mouths completely. These needle-like teeth are transparent, making them nearly invisible until it's too late. The viperfish uses bioluminescent lures along its body to attract prey, then strikes with incredible speed, impaling its victim on those terrible fangs. Despite its fearsome appearance, the viperfish is only about a foot long, a tiny predator by surface standards, but perfectly sized for the energy-poor environment of the midnight zone. Food in the midnight zone is precious and rare. Most nutrition comes in the form of marine snow, the constant drift of organic particles from the surface, or the occasional larger prize, a dead whale, fish, or squid that sinks from the surface waters above. When a large animal dies at the surface and sinks to these depths, it creates what scientists call a whale fall, a sudden bonanza of food that can sustain an entire community for years. A single dead whale can provide nourishment for hundreds of species over several decades. First come the scavengers, hagfish and sleeper sharks that tear away the soft tissue. Then come the specialized worms and crustaceans that colonize the bones, extracting fats and nutrients. Finally, bacteria break down the remaining organic matter, and the whale's legacy becomes part of the deep-sea ecosystem. These whale falls create oases of life in the food-poor deep sea, temporary gardens that bloom and fade over decades. The midnight zone is also home to some of the ocean's most ancient life forms, giant isopods. Relatives of the pillbugs you might find in your garden grow to the size of footballs here, scuttling across the seafloor on 7 pairs of legs, looking like prehistoric armored tanks. They can survive for years without eating, their metabolism slowed to an almost imperceptible crawl, waiting patiently for the next meal to drift down from above. Vampire squid, not actually squid at all, but their own unique lineage, drift through the midnight zone feeding on marine snow. They have the lowest metabolism of any cephalopod, existing in a state of barely there life, conserving every possible ounce of energy. When threatened, they can eject a cloud of bioluminescent mucus that glows for several minutes, confusing predators while the vampire squid escapes into the darkness. It's smoke and mirrors, deep sea style, except the smoke glows. The midnight zone extends from 1,000 to 4,000 meters. That's over 2 miles of vertical space, more than the height of 7 Empire State Buildings stacked on top of each other. In this enormous volume of water, pressure increases steadily, temperature remains nearly constant, and life persists in forms that seem impossible. Every creature here is a testament to evolution's creativity, proof that life finds a way even in the most challenging conditions imaginable. Octopuses in the midnight zone have evolved special proteins in their blood that allow them to transport oxygen efficiently despite the cold and pressure. Some have Dumbo-like fins on their heads that help them swim through the water with surprising grace. Others crawl along the seafloor on 8 arms, exploring the sediment for buried prey. Despite the harsh conditions, octopuses here display the same intelligence as their shallow water cousins, solving problems, manipulating objects, and showing personalities that suggest a rich inner life even in this dark realm. The midnight zone is largely unexplored. We have better maps of Mars than of these depths. Every submersible dive brings discoveries, new species, new behaviors, new ecosystems we never knew existed. Scientists estimate that we've discovered only a tiny fraction of the species that live in the midnight zone. For every creature we've named and studied, dozens or hundreds remain unknown, carrying on their lives in the darkness, unobserved by human eyes. Lying here, imagining yourself sinking through these profound depths, you might feel a sense of peace rather than fear. The midnight zone is not chaotic or frantic. It's a place of profound quiet and slow rhythms. Creatures here don't rush. Every movement is calculated, every calorie precious. Life here has a meditative quality, an acceptance of scarcity and darkness, a patience measured in decades rather than hours. The water at these depths is some of the purest on Earth. No sunlight means no photosynthesis, which means fewer particles and less biological activity. The water here is clear as glass. If you had a light, you could see farther here than anywhere in the ocean. But in the natural state, that clarity doesn't matter. The darkness is so complete that visibility means nothing. It's a crystal clear darkness, if such a thing can be imagined. Jellyfish in the midnight zone have evolved to enormous sizes. Some species have bells several feet across, trailing tentacles that extend for meters in every direction. They drift through the darkness like parachutes, their tentacles spread wide to maximize their chances of encountering prey. When something touches those tentacles, specialized cells called nematocysts fire tiny harpoons loaded with paralytic toxins, immobilizing the prey before it can escape. As we prepare to descend even deeper into the abyssal zone, take a moment to appreciate the midnight zone's dark majesty. This is a realm that has existed unchanged for millions of years, a sanctuary of slow-motion life where ancient patterns continue undisturbed. Your breathing now should be so slow and deep that you barely notice it, in and out, like the patient pulse of life in these dark waters. The abyss burns where pressure reaches its peak, yet life persists in impossible ways. Now we sink below 4,000 meters, entering the abyssal zone, which extends down to about 6,000 meters, nearly 4 miles beneath the surface. The word abyss comes from the Greek word meaning bottomless, and ancient sailors feared these depths as the edge of the world, the place where the ocean fell away into nothing. But the abyss is far from empty. It's home to creatures and ecosystems that redefine our understanding of what's possible for life on Earth. The pressure here is almost incomprehensible, 400 to 600 times atmospheric pressure at sea level. A human body exposed to this pressure would be compressed instantly, but the creatures here have evolved without air spaces in their bodies. Their cells contain the same pressure as the surrounding water, making them perfectly adapted to conditions that would destroy us in seconds. Some deep-sea fish can actually die if brought to the surface too quickly, not because of the pressure drop itself, but because gases dissolved in their tissues expand catastrophically. The temperature here is near freezing, hovering just above 0 to 3 degrees Celsius. This cold has been stable for millions of years, creating an environment where evolution can proceed at the slowest possible pace. Many creatures here have growth rates measured in decades or centuries. Some deep-sea corals are over 4,000 years old, having begun life when humans were still building the Egyptian pyramids. The abyssal plain, the seafloor at these depths, covers more of Earth's surface than all the continents combined. It's the largest habitat on our planet, yet one of the least known. The seafloor here is covered in fine sediment, the accumulated remains of billions of years of marine snow. This sediment is sometimes called red clay and can be hundreds of meters thick, a soft blanket covering the ancient basaltic rock of the ocean floor. Life on the abyssal plain exists at the slowest possible pace. Sea cucumbers, relatives of starfish and sea urchins, crawl across the sediment on tiny tube feet, leaving trails that can last for months in the still water. They process the sediment like living vacuum cleaners, extracting whatever organic matter remains after its long journey from the surface. Some species of sea cucumber have been filmed in the same location years apart, having moved only a few meters. Life here is measured in geological time. Brittle stars, delicate relatives of starfish, gather in enormous aggregations on the abyssal plain, sometimes thousands or millions in a single area. They raise their long, spindly arms into the water column, filtering out particles of food. Seen from a submersible, these aggregations look like underwater forests of waving arms, a garden of creatures so fragile they seem made of glass. Why they gather in such numbers is still a mystery. Perhaps it improves their feeding efficiency, or perhaps it's for reproduction, allowing them to release eggs and sperm with greater chance of fertilization. But the most extraordinary ecosystems in the abyss don't depend on marine snow from the surface at all. They exist around hydrothermal vents, underwater hot springs, where superheated water, enriched with minerals from deep within Earth's crust, pours out into the frigid ocean. These vents were only discovered in 1977, and their discovery revolutionized our understanding of life on Earth. At hydrothermal vents, water heated to over 400 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt lead, erupts from the seafloor, creating underwater geysers surrounded by chimneys of deposited minerals. These chimneys can grow to the size of buildings, built over decades or centuries as minerals precipitate from the superheated water. Despite temperatures that would instantly kill most life, and toxic chemicals that would poison conventional organisms, these vents support thriving ecosystems as productive as tropical rainforests. The secret to life at hydrothermal vents is chemosynthesis, the ability of specialized bacteria to convert the chemicals in vent water into energy, without any need for sunlight. These bacteria form the base of a food chain completely independent from photosynthesis, proving that life doesn't need the sun to flourish. This discovery has profound implications for the search for life elsewhere in the universe. If life can thrive around hydrothermal vents on Earth, perhaps it could exist in the dark oceans of Jupiter's moon Europa or Saturn's moon Enceladus. Giant tube worms, up to 8 feet long and as thick as your arm, cluster around hydrothermal vents like alien flowers. They have no mouth and no digestive system. Instead, they host chemosynthetic bacteria inside specialized organs, providing the bacteria with chemicals from the vent water and receiving nutrition in return. Their bright red plumes, extending from the tops of their white tubes, are filled with hemoglobin that captures sulfides from the vent water and oxygen from the seawater, delivering both to the bacteria living inside. These tube worms can grow remarkably fast for deep-sea creatures, sometimes several centimeters per year, fueled by the abundant energy from chemosynthesis. Some have been aged at over 250 years old, having anchored themselves to their spot on the seafloor before the American Revolution, and persisting through centuries of human history, completely unaware of our existence. Yeti crabs, discovered only in 2005, crowd around vents with their hairy arms extended into the water. Those hair-like setae on their arms host bacteria, which the crabs harvest and eat. They're farming bacteria on their own bodies, waving their arms through the mineral-rich water to provide their bacterial crops with nutrients, then scraping them off and consuming them. It's aquaculture at its most primitive and most ingenious. Vent mussels and clams, some growing to the size of dinner plates, cluster on rocks near vents, filtering bacteria from the water. Vent shrimps swarm by the thousands in the warmest areas, their bodies packed so tightly they form living carpets. Each of these species has evolved to exploit some specific niche in the vent environment, creating ecosystems that can support hundreds of species in areas just a few meters across. Hydrothermal vents are ephemeral on geological timescales. They can last for decades or centuries, but eventually the geological activity that powers them shifts, and they go cold. When a vent dies, its ecosystem must disperse, larvae drifting through the deep ocean currents in search of new vents. Some larvae may drift for years before finding a new home, surviving in the cold, dark water on stored energy reserves. It's one of the most perilous journeys in nature, and most larvae never complete it, but enough succeed to ensure that active vents are always colonized. Cold seeps are another type of deep-sea ecosystem where hydrocarbons, methane and other gases seep up from beneath the seafloor. These seeps support their own unique communities based on bacteria that can oxidize methane, converting it into energy. Tube worms, clams and mussels, specialized for cold seeps, create gardens in areas where methane bubbles up from the sediment, their existence dependent on this natural gas that we usually think of as fuel rather than food. The abyssal zone is also home to Dumbo octopuses, the deepest living octopuses known to science, named for the ear-like fins on their heads that resemble Disney's flying elephant. They drift through the water with surprising grace, using their fins to swim rather than jet propulsion. They've been filmed at depths over 7,000 meters, deeper than Mount Everest is tall, calmly floating along the seafloor, searching for small crustaceans and worms in the sediment. These octopuses have evolved to be almost translucent, with soft gelatinous bodies that can withstand the enormous pressure. They lack the ink sac that most octopuses use for defense. There's no point in ejecting a cloud of ink when there's no light for it to obscure. Instead, they rely on their transparency and the vastness of the ocean to avoid predators. When disturbed, they simply drift away, their ear-like fins undulating slowly, moving with the same peaceful rhythm that hopefully has overtaken your own breathing now. Fish in the abyssal zone are scarce, but remarkable. Snailfish hold the record for the deepest living fish ever filmed, found at depths of over 8,000 meters in the Mariana Trench. They look almost ghostly, with translucent skin, tiny eyes, and bodies that seem too fragile to exist. Yet they thrive at depths where the pressure would crush a submarine, proof that life has no depth limit if the adaptations are right. The abyssal zone teaches us humility. For all our technology and science, we've explored less than 5% of this vast realm. Each expedition discovers dozens of new species. Each video from a submersible reveals behaviors never before witnessed. We're like visitors to an alien planet, except this planet is our own, the same Earth we've lived on for our entire existence, just the parts we haven't bothered to explore. Imagine lying here, sinking peacefully through these deepest waters, surrounded by darkness so complete that light itself seems like a distant myth. The pressure around you is unimaginable, the cold intense, yet life persists, not just survives, thrives, creates communities, builds ecosystems, reproduces and evolves, and continues the grand experiment of life that has been running on Earth for 4 billion years. The water here is the oldest in the ocean. Some of it hasn't seen the surface in over 1,000 years. It carries chemical signatures from its long journey through the ocean's depths, isotopes that tell scientists where it came from and how long it's been traveling. This water has circulated through the global ocean conveyor belt, sinking in the cold polar regions and creeping along the seafloor for centuries before slowly rising again in other parts of the world. As we prepare to descend into the final zone, the Hadal zone of the deepest trenches, let yourself appreciate the abyss, 4 miles underwater, in complete darkness, at near freezing temperatures, under pressure that would destroy almost anything from the surface. Life has found ways to flourish. If life can succeed here, in these most extreme conditions, what does that say about life's tenacity throughout the universe? Your body should feel completely relaxed now, heavy and comfortable, sinking into whatever supports you. Your breathing should be so slow and deep that you barely notice it. The rhythm of the ocean has become your rhythm, slow, patient, eternal. There's no rush. There never was. Time in the deep ocean isn't measured in minutes or hours, but in the slow accumulation of sediment, the patient growth of corals, the centuries-long lives of creatures that have never known sunlight. The Hadal zone, the deepest trenches where Earth sips crust bends and life refuses to surrender. Now we descend into the final frontier of the oceans, the realm known as the Hadal zone, its name borrowed from Hades, the Greek underworld. This mysterious domain exists only in the deepest trenches of the sea, where the seafloor drops beyond 6,000 meters and plunges to nearly 11,000 meters in the Mariana Trench, the deepest place on our planet. Here, Earth's crust bends and folds as tectonic plates collide, one sliding beneath another in a violent slow-motion ballet that sculpts canyons deeper than the tallest mountains on land. Down here, pressure becomes an unimaginable force. At the very bottom of the Mariana Trench, the weight of the ocean above reaches more than 1,000 times atmospheric pressure, like having 50 jumbo jets pressing down on every square inch of your body. Water itself behaves differently at these depths. It becomes slightly compressed, its molecules squeezed closer together, denser than the water we know at the surface. If you were somehow able to survive the crushing darkness and rise upward, you would literally feel yourself becoming lighter and more buoyant as the water around you grew less compact. The temperature hovers just above freezing, usually between 1 and 4 degrees Celsius. Combined with the immense pressure and eternal absence of sunlight, the Hadal zone seems like a place utterly hostile to life. And yet, against all odds, life endures. Strange and resilient creatures, fish, amphipods, sea cucumbers, giant single-celled organisms, and pressure-loving bacteria have carved out their existence in what may be the harshest environment on Earth. Among them, the snailfish reigns as one of the most remarkable survivors, almost translucent, with bodies soft and gelatinous. These fish are the ghosts of the deep. They have no scales, which would crumble under the pressure, and their bones are barely mineralized, almost cartilage-like, flexible enough to withstand forces that would shatter ordinary skeletons. They glide gracefully over the seafloor, feeding on amphipods and other tiny crustaceans. On a molecular level, their survival is a marvel. Specialized proteins shield delicate biological processes from the crushing weight of the ocean, and their cell membranes are engineered by evolution to remain supple and functional, where most life would collapse. The amphipods of the Hadal trenches tell a different story of adaptation. To the untrained eye, they resemble oversized shrimp, but their resilience is extraordinary. While their shallow water cousins are scarcely larger than a grain of rice, some Hadal amphipods grow as large as a human hand. They swarm hungrily over anything that drifts down from above, a whale carcass, a fallen fish, or even scientific bait dropped by explorers. Within hours, thousands may gather, engulfing the prize in a seething tide of exoskeletons. Even their armor is adapted. They incorporate aluminum hydroxide into their shells, a natural pressure shield that allows them to survive in conditions fatal to most organisms. Uniquely, they can ascend and descend across vast pressure gradients within the trench, their biochemistry flexible enough to tolerate rapid changes that would destroy other life forms. Moving more slowly are the sea cucumbers, strange sausage-shaped animals that resemble blobs of animated mud. They crawl patiently across the trench floor, ingesting sediment and extracting whatever organic material is hidden within. At depths surpassing 10,000 meters, they remain unfazed, carrying on a lifestyle that has likely changed little for millions of years. Their survival strategy is not speed or strength, but patience and simplicity, low energy needs, slow metabolisms, and an unshakable persistence in an environment that offers little. Even more alien are the xenophiophores, single-celled giants that defy our understanding of biology. Each one is a solitary cell, yet can grow as large as a golf ball, crafting fragile tests. Shell-like structures from grains of sediment glued together. Related to amoebas, these bizarre organisms thrive where few others can, carpeting parts of the seafloor and creating microhabitats for smaller creatures. In the Haddle world, even a single cell can become an ecosystem. The environment itself is as dynamic as it is extreme. The trenches are V-shaped valleys with steep, unstable walls scarred by landslides that send cascades of sediment crashing into the abyss. For the creatures below, such events can mean sudden burial and devastation, yet life finds a way back. Larvae drifting down from less disturbed regions repopulate the seafloor, restoring the ecosystem in a cycle as old as the trenches themselves. The Tolda trenches are also earthquake zones, restless scars of the planet. They form where tectonic plates grind and buckle, and so the very ground beneath these creatures shifts and shudders. The Mariana Trench, like many others, lies along the Pacific Ring of Fire, where volcanic and seismic activity continually reshapes the seabed. For life here, survival means not only withstanding pressure, cold, and darkness, but also living amid the rumble and chaos of Earth's restless crust. Perhaps the most fundamental inhabitants of the Haddle zone are the microbes. Bacteria here are astonishingly diverse, capable of thriving under pressures that would render ordinary enzymes useless. These pisophiles, pressure-loving organisms, have re-engineered the very building blocks of life. They form the invisible foundation of the trench ecosystem, breaking down every scrap of organic material that reaches these depths and recycling its nutrients for the larger creatures. Some scientists suspect that these microbes may represent some of Earth's most ancient lineages, descendants of primordial life that first emerged in the hot, pressurized depths of the young ocean billions of years ago. Studying them might allow us to glimpse the conditions under which life itself began, long before oxygen, long before plants, long before animals. The Haddle zone is not just a place of crushing extremes, it is a living laboratory, a reminder that life's resilience is almost limitless. Where pressure would pulverize bones, where cold slows the pulse of existence to near stillness, where sunlight will never reach, life still adapts, evolves, and endures. In the deepest trenches, Earth bends, the ocean crushes, and yet existence refuses to surrender. The midnight depths, where eternal night blooms with light and life, creates its own universe. And now we descend deeper still, crossing an invisible boundary at about 1,000 meters, where the last whisper of sunlight finally gives up its struggle against the darkness and fades into memory. We are entering the bathypelagic zone, the midnight zone, stretching from 1,000 meters down to about 4,000 meters below the surface. Here, in what might be called the ocean's eternal night, we discover that darkness does not mean emptiness, and that some of the most beautiful light shows on our planet happen where the sun has never dared to venture. The pressure here is tremendous by our surface standards. about 100 to 400 times what you feel sitting in your comfortable chair right now. At 1,000 meters, the pressure is roughly 100 times that at sea level. At 4,000 meters, it reaches 400 times surface pressure. It would feel like having several elephants sitting on every square inch of your body, yet for the creatures that call this place home, it's simply the normal weight of existence. They have never known anything lighter, never experienced the ease of surface pressure, and their bodies have adapted so perfectly to these conditions that they would actually be uncomfortable in the shallow pressures we consider normal. The temperature in the midnight zone has settled into a steady, cold embrace around 4 degrees Celsius, just above freezing. It's the temperature of your refrigerator, cold enough to make you want to wrap yourself in the warmest blanket you can find. Yet this cold is not cruel or uncomfortable. It's simply the ocean's way of preserving life, slowing down biological processes, making food last longer, allowing creatures to exist on very little energy for very long periods of time. This cold is so constant that it becomes a defining characteristic of life itself in these depths. In this realm of perpetual darkness, where no plant can grow because no sunlight can reach, we might expect to find a barren wasteland. Instead, we discover something magical, an entire ecosystem based on the most creative forms of light ever devised by living creatures. The bioluminescence we glimpsed in the twilight zone reaches full flower here, creating displays that would make the northern lights jealous. Every creature here seems to be an artist working in living light. Some fish have rows of photophores, light-producing organs, arranged along their bodies like strings of pearls, each one capable of producing light in different colors, intensities, and patterns. They can make themselves twinkle like stars, flash like strobe lights, or glow with the steady radiance of underwater lighthouses. It's as if the darkness itself has challenged life to become more creative, and life has responded by learning to paint with its own luminescence. The chemistry of bioluminescence becomes even more remarkable in the midnight zone. The luciferin-luciferase reaction that produces light operates at an efficiency of nearly 90%, meaning almost all the energy goes into making light rather than heat. Compare this to an incandescent light bulb, which converts only about 5% of its energy into light, and you realize that life has mastered lighting technology far beyond our current capabilities. Some creatures can even control the color of their light, shifting from blue to green to red depending on their needs. The deep-sea anglerfish, one of the most famous residents of the midnight zone, carries perhaps the most elegant fishing equipment ever evolved. From their heads extends a long, flexible rod tipped with a glowing lure, a living fishing pole that they use to attract prey in the darkness. They don't need to hunt actively. They simply position themselves in the water column and wait, their lure glowing like an underwater star, attracting smaller fish with the promise of food but delivering instead a quick and efficient end to their journey. But the anglerfish's story gets even more remarkable when we consider their reproductive strategy. The large, fearsome-looking fish with the glowing lure is actually the female. The male anglerfish, much smaller and initially independent, must find a female in the vast darkness of the deep ocean. Imagine trying to find one specific person in a completely dark city the size of a continent. When he does find her, he bites onto her side and gradually fuses with her body, becoming a permanent part of her, providing sperm whenever she needs to reproduce. It's one of the most extreme forms of partnership in the natural world, born from the challenges of finding a mate in the endless midnight of the deep sea. Giant squid patrol these depths like living submarines, their eyes as large as dinner plates, the better to gather what little light exists in their dark world. These mysterious creatures, reaching lengths that rival those of sperm whales, remain one of the ocean's greatest mysteries. We know they exist because we find their remains in the stomachs of whales and occasionally washed up on beaches, but observing a living giant squid in its natural habitat is like catching a glimpse of a sea monster from our deepest mythology. Recent rare footage has revealed them to be graceful, almost ethereal creatures, moving through the water with surprising delicacy for animals of their size. The Midnight Zone is also home to creatures that seem designed by a dreamer with unlimited imagination. Vampire squid, despite their ominous name, are gentle filter feeders that look like living umbrellas made of dark velvet. When threatened, they can turn themselves inside out, revealing a shocking display of protective spines and bioluminescent lights that make them appear to be glowing pine cones floating in liquid space. This defensive strategy, called pumpkin posture, transforms them from what looks like easy prey into something that appears dangerous and unappetizing. Bioluminescent jellyfish drift through these depths like living chandeliers, their translucent bells pulsing with internal lights that can be red, blue, green, or combinations of colors that have no names. They move through the water with the rhythm of a slow heartbeat, their tentacles trailing behind them like luminous ribbons, creating moving art installations that would be the envy of any human artist. Some of these jellyfish are so large they could easily engulf a human swimmer, yet they move with such gentle grace that they seem more like living architecture than animals. The Midnight Zone is also where we discover that the ocean has its own snow season that never ends. Marine snow, a continuous gentle precipitation of organic matter from the layers above, drifts down through these depths like underwater snowflakes. It's made up of dead plankton, fish waste, fragments of larger creatures, and the molted shells of microscopic animals, all clumped together into flakes that can range in size from tiny specks to clusters several centimeters across. This marine snow is the foundation of life in the Midnight Zone. Since no plants can grow in the eternal darkness, all food must come from above, either as this gentle rain of organic matter or as the occasional bonanza of a large creature, a whale, a large fish, a squid, that has died in the upper layers and sunk to the depths. These food falls are like winning the lottery for deep-sea creatures. They can feed an entire community for months or even years. Recent research has revealed that marine snow plays an even more crucial role than previously understood. As organic particles sink through the water column, they aggregate and disaggregate, creating a complex web of nutrients that supports entire food webs. The snow acts as a sort of ecological elevator, carrying not just food but also bacteria, viruses, and other microorganisms that help maintain the chemical balance of the deep ocean. The creatures of the Midnight Zone have developed the most patient hunting and feeding strategies imaginable. Many of them can go months between meals, their metabolisms slowed to a crawl, their body temperatures matching the cold water around them, their movements reduced to the minimum necessary to survive. They live life in extreme slow motion, making every calorie count, every movement purposeful. Some fish here have evolved jaws that can unhinge and expand to enormous proportions, allowing them to swallow prey larger than themselves. Gulper eels can open their mouths to proportions that seem physically impossible, turning themselves into living nets that can engulf creatures many times their normal size. They're like underwater pythons, able to consume a meal that will sustain them for months. Their stomachs can expand to accommodate prey up to 25% of their own body length. Other creatures have taken the opposite approach, becoming so specialized that they feed only on the marine snow, developing elaborate filtering systems that can extract nutrients from the constant rain of organic particles. They've become living vacuum cleaners, perfectly adapted to harvesting the ocean's gentlest precipitation. These filter feeders often have feathery appendages or complex mouth parts that can strain microscopic food particles from the water with remarkable efficiency. The Midnight Zone is also where we find some of the most extreme examples of sexual dimorphism in the natural world. In many deep-sea species, the females grow to normal size while the males remain tiny, sometimes hundreds of times smaller than their mates. These dwarf males exist for one purpose only: to find a female in the vast darkness and ensure the continuation of their species. Some species have males that are so small they were originally thought to be parasites rather than the same species as the much larger females. In this realm of eternal night, timing becomes crucial. Many species coordinate their reproductive activities with the lunar cycle, even though no moonlight can reach these depths. Somehow, through chemical signals or pressure changes or mechanisms we don't yet understand, creatures thousands of meters below the surface know when the moon is full or new, and they time their most important life events accordingly. This lunar synchronization may be related to the tidal forces that affect water pressure, even at great depths. The midnight zone is also where we discover that sound travels differently in the deep ocean. The water here is so dense and uniform that sounds can travel for incredible distances. Whales that dive to these depths, sperm whales, beaked whales, and others, can communicate across hundreds of miles of ocean. Their calls echo through the darkness, like songs in a vast underwater cathedral, allowing them to stay in contact with their families and locate prey across distances that would be impossible to manage through any other means. Many fish in the midnight zone have evolved to be neutrally buoyant, perfectly balanced so that they neither sink nor rise, allowing them to hover motionless in the water column like living statues. This adaptation saves enormous amounts of energy. They don't need to constantly swim to maintain their position. They can simply exist, waiting patiently for food to come to them or for the right moment to make their move. Some achieve this neutral buoyancy through specialized swim bladders filled with gases, while others use oils or other low-density compounds. The midnight zone is perhaps the largest habitat on our planet. It represents about 75% of all the living space in the ocean, which means it's about 60% of all the living space on Earth. Yet it remains one of the least explored and most poorly understood environments. We've sent more people to the surface of the moon than have ever visited the deeper parts of the midnight zone. Each expedition to these depths reveals new species, new adaptations, and new ways of life that challenge our understanding of what's possible. Recent technological advances have begun to reveal the midnight zone's secrets. Autonomous underwater vehicles equipped with cameras and sensors can now spend weeks in these depths, recording the daily lives of creatures that have never been observed before. These studies have revealed complex communities with their own predator-prey relationships, mating rituals, and seasonal cycles, an entire world operating according to its own rules. Despite its challenges, the crushing pressure, the eternal darkness, the scarcity of food, the midnight zone teems with life. Scientists estimate that the biomass of creatures living in this zone may exceed that of all the fish in the surface waters combined. It's a reminder that life is incredibly creative, incredibly persistent, and incredibly adaptable. The midnight zone challenges every assumption we might have about the requirements for a thriving ecosystem. Deep-sea gigantism reaches new extremes in the midnight zone, where creatures grow to sizes that would be impossible in the surface waters. Giant isopods the size of footballs, squid with tentacles longer than school buses, and fish with mouths large enough to swallow creatures twice their size all call this zone home. The gigantism may be an adaptation to the food-poor environment. Larger creatures can go longer between meals and can take advantage of larger food sources when they become available. As we prepare to descend even deeper into the true abyss, take a moment to appreciate the remarkable community we're leaving behind in the midnight zone. Here, in what might seem like the most challenging environment on our planet, life has learned to create light, to find food in scarcity, to communicate across vast distances, and to reproduce successfully despite the challenges of finding a mate in the endless darkness. The midnight zone teaches us that darkness is not the absence of life, but simply a different stage for life's most creative performances. The bioluminescence we've witnessed here is not just survival, it's artistry, communication, seduction, and defense all rolled into one. It's life's way of saying that no environment is too challenging, no conditions too extreme for the creativity and persistence of living things. Feel yourself floating through this midnight realm, surrounded by creatures that glow like living stars, supported by water so dense it feels almost solid, enveloped by darkness so complete that any light becomes precious. The midnight zone is the ocean's way of showing us that even in the most challenging conditions, life finds a way not just to survive, but to create beauty, to form communities, and to thrive. The abyss meus, where the ocean keeps its deepest dreams and life defies all expectations. Now we cross another invisible threshold, descending past 4,000 meters into the abysso-pelagic zone, the abyss, the deep, the heart of the ocean's most profound mysteries. Here, stretching from 4,000 to about 6,000 meters below the surface, we enter a realm so alien that it might as well be on another planet, yet so fundamental to our world that life as we know it could not exist without it. The pressure here is beyond our everyday comprehension, 400 to 600 times the pressure at sea level. Imagine the weight of a full-grown elephant pressing down on every square inch of your body, and you begin to understand what existence means in the abyss. Steel spheres designed to withstand these pressures must have walls several inches thick, yet the creatures that live here have bodies made mostly of water and tissue that somehow maintain their shape and function under pressures that would instantly crush any surface-dwelling animal. At these depths, water itself behaves differently. The molecules are compressed so tightly that the water becomes noticeably more dense, more viscous, more resistant to movement. It's like the difference between swimming in air and swimming in honey, though the effect is subtle enough that specialized deep-sea creatures have adapted to move through this thicker medium with surprising grace. The temperature has reached its deepest chill, a steady 2 to 3 degrees Celsius, just above freezing, a cold so profound and constant that it has shaped every aspect of life here. It's the temperature of a cave that has never known summer, a cold that seeps into everything and slows the very chemistry of life to a whisper. Yet this is not a cruel cold. It's the ocean's way of preserving life, of making the scarce resources here last as long as possible. If the midnight zone was dark, the abyss is darkness beyond darkness, a blackness so complete that the very concept of light becomes abstract. No photon of sunlight has ever reached these depths. The only light here is the light that life creates for itself, and even that is scarce and precious. Most creatures here have given up on eyes entirely, or have evolved eyes so sensitive they can detect the faintest chemical luminescence, like living telescopes designed to find stars in a universe that forgot about light. Yet in this deepest darkness, life has not given up. It has become more creative, more patient, more wonderfully adapted than anywhere else on our planet. The creatures of the abyss move through their world like living ghosts, many of them translucent or completely transparent, visible only when they choose to produce their own brief, precious light. The seafloor here, thousands of meters below the surface, is covered in the finest sediment, the accumulated remains of billions of years of marine snow. It's a soft, muddy surface that preserves everything that settles on it, creating a library of the ocean's history, written in layers of sediment so fine they feel like flour. Walking on the deep sea floor would be like walking through the deepest, softest snow, except that this snow is made of the memories of ancient life. This sediment, called pelagic ooze, is composed primarily of the tiny shells and skeletons of microscopic marine organisms that lived and died in the surface waters millions of years ago. Some layers contain the fossilized remains of diatoms, glass-like algae, while others are made up of the calcium carbonate shells of foraminifera. Scientists can read these sediment layers like pages in a book, learning about ancient climates, ocean chemistry, and mass extinction events that occurred millions of years ago. Rolling across these sediment plains like underwater tumbleweeds are some of the most bizarre creatures on our planet. Sea pigs, actually a type of sea cucumber, move across the abyssal seafloor in herds, like underwater cattle grazing on the organic matter in the sediment. They're translucent pink animals that look like someone tried to imagine what an alien might look like, and decided on something that resembled a pig, crossed with a walking cushion. These sea pigs are more sophisticated than they appear. They can sense chemical trails in the sediment, following the richest sources of food across the seafloor. When food becomes scarce in one area, entire herds will migrate to better feeding grounds, sometimes traveling hundreds of kilometers across the abyssal plains. Recent studies have revealed that they even coordinate their feeding behavior, working together to process the sediment more efficiently. Tripod fish have evolved one of the most energy-efficient lifestyles possible in the deep ocean. They position themselves on the seafloor using 3 elongated fin rays like a tripod, then simply wait, sometimes for hours or days, for small creatures to swim within range of their mouths. They don't hunt, they simply exist, motionless, patient, like living statues placed strategically on the deep seafloor. Some have been observed maintaining the same position for weeks at a time. The glass sponges of the abyss create some of the most beautiful structures in the deep ocean. These ancient creatures, some of which may be thousands of years old, build intricate skeletons of pure silica, essentially glass, that form elaborate, translucent structures rising from the seafloor like underwater cathedrals. They filter water through their bodies so slowly and gently that they seem more like living architecture than animals. These glass sponge reefs can grow to enormous sizes, creating 3-dimensional habitats that support entire communities of other deep-sea creatures. The sponges grow incredibly slowly. Some may add only a few millimeters to their height each year, but their patience is rewarded with lifespans that can exceed those of the oldest trees on land. Some glass sponges may be over 10,000 years old, making them among the oldest living things on our planet. Giant isopods, relatives of the common roly-poly bugs you might find in your garden, have grown to enormous proportions in the deep ocean. Some can reach the size of footballs, their armored bodies protecting them as they scavenge across the abyssal seafloor. They can go years between meals, their metabolism slowed to such an extent that they exist in a state that can only be described as living hibernation. The phenomenon of deep-sea gigantism reaches its full expression in the abyss. Scientists believe this gigantism is an adaptation to several factors: the cold temperatures that slow metabolism and allow for longer lifespans, the scarcity of food that favors larger creatures that can go longer between meals, and the low oxygen levels that favor more efficient body sizes. The result is creatures that would be impossible in the surface waters, isopods the size of small dogs, amphipods larger than rats, and worms that stretch for meters across the seafloor. The abyss is also home to some of the ocean's most spectacular food events. When a whale dies in the surface waters and sinks to the depths, it creates what scientists call a whale fall, a bonanza of food that can support an entire community for decades. The whale's body becomes a temporary oasis of abundance in the food-poor deep sea, supporting first scavengers that strip the meat from the bones, then bacteria that break down the oils in the bones, and finally specialized worms and clams that can feed on the chemicals produced by the decomposing skeleton. These whale falls create temporary ecosystems that can last for 50 years or more, supporting species found nowhere else on Earth. The decomposition happens in distinct stages. First, the mobile scavenger stage, where fish, crabs, and other scavengers consume the soft tissues. Then the enrichment opportunist stage, where bacteria break down the remaining organic matter. And finally, the sulfophilic stage, where specialized bacteria and chemosynthetic organisms colonize the bones themselves. They're like islands of abundance scattered across the deep seafloor, connected by the slow movements of creatures that can sense the chemical signals of decomposition from great distances. Some whale falls have been discovered that support over 400 species of animals, many of which are found nowhere else in the ocean. These oases of life demonstrate that even in the food-poor abyss, abundance is possible given the right circumstances. The abyssal plains, vast flat expanses of the deep sea floor, cover more of the Earth's surface than all the continents combined. Yet they are not empty deserts as we might imagine. They teem with microscopic life, with bacteria and archaea that have found ways to extract energy from the chemistry of the sediments themselves. These microorganisms may represent the largest biomass of any ecosystem on Earth, yet they exist in a realm so removed from our experience that we're only beginning to understand their importance to the planet's overall ecology. Recent discoveries have revealed that some abyssal bacteria can metabolize manganese, iron, and other metals in the sediments, creating chemical reactions that release energy. These metal-eating bacteria may play a crucial role in the global cycling of elements, affecting ocean chemistry in ways we're only beginning to understand. They represent a form of life that is independent of sunlight, extracting energy directly from the chemistry of the Earth itself. In some parts of the abyss, the seafloor is punctuated by seamounts, underwater mountains that rise from the deep plains like islands in an aerial view. These seamounts create their own ecosystems, with deep-sea corals and sponges creating three-dimensional habitats in the otherwise flat world of the abyss. The currents that flow around these underwater mountains bring nutrients and oxygen, creating oases of relatively abundant life in the sparse world of the deep sea floor. Recent mapping expeditions have discovered seamounts that are twice as tall as the world's tallest building, hidden beneath kilometers of water. These underwater mountains often support unique communities of fish, corals, and sponges that are found nowhere else on Earth. Each seamount is like a biological island, isolated from others by vast expanses of abyssal plain, leading to high levels of endemism and evolutionary uniqueness. The creatures of the abyss have evolved some of the most extreme adaptations to scarcity ever documented. Many fish here have evolved huge mouths and expandable stomachs, allowing them to consume prey much larger than themselves whenever the opportunity presents itself. They live by the motto that any meal might be their last for months, so every feeding opportunity must be maximized. Others have evolved to be incredibly efficient, with metabolisms so slow that they seem to exist in a different relationship with time itself. A deep-sea creature might take weeks to digest a single meal, months to grow noticeably larger, years to reach reproductive maturity. They live life at the pace of glaciers, making every calorie count, every movement purposeful. Some abyssal fish have metabolic rates that are 20 times slower than their shallow water relatives. The abyss is also where we discover that the ocean has its own weather systems. Deep currents flow along the seafloor like underwater rivers, carrying nutrients and oxygen from distant sources. These currents can create underwater storms, stirring up the sediments and creating clouds of particles that can affect visibility for hundreds of kilometers. The deep ocean has its own seasons too, related not to the sun but to the patterns of productivity far above and the resulting rain of organic matter that eventually reaches the depths. These deep-sea storms can be triggered by underwater avalanches, where accumulated sediments suddenly cascade down underwater slopes, creating turbidity currents that can travel thousands of kilometers across the abyssal seafloor. These events, while rare, can reshape vast areas of the deep ocean floor and affect the communities of creatures that live there. Temperature here is remarkably constant, that steady 2 to 3 degrees Celsius, that varies little from place to place or season to season. Yet even tiny variations in temperature can have profound effects in the deep sea, where creatures have evolved to live within very narrow ranges of conditions. A change of just a degree or two can shift the boundaries between different communities of deep sea life. The abyss is also home to some of the oldest creatures on our planet. Some deep-sea sponges are thought to be thousands of years old, having grown so slowly in the cold, nutrient-poor conditions that they were already ancient when human civilization was just beginning. They are living libraries of the ocean's history, having filtered the same water for longer than recorded human history. Deep-sea corals in the abyss can also achieve remarkable longevity, with some specimens estimated to be over 4,000 years old. These slow-growing organisms create complex three-dimensional reefs that provide habitat for thousands of other species. Unlike their shallow water cousins, deep-sea corals don't depend on photosynthetic algae for food. Instead, they filter nutrients from the water column and feed on marine snow. In the deepest parts of the abyss, we begin to encounter the most extreme pressure environments on our planet. Here, water itself behaves differently, becoming more dense, more viscous, more likely to preserve rather than decompose. It's as if the ocean is preparing us for the final frontier, the deepest trenches where pressure becomes so extreme that it creates environments unlike anywhere else on Earth. Recent discoveries in the abyss have revealed that it plays a crucial role in regulating our planet's climate. The cold, dense water here is part of the global circulation system that moves heat and nutrients around the world. The carbon that falls into the abyss as marine snow can be stored in the deep sediments for thousands of years, helping to regulate the amount of CO2 in our atmosphere. The abyss acts as one of the planet's most important carbon sinks. Organic matter that sinks to these depths is often buried in the sediments before it can decompose completely, effectively removing carbon from the atmosphere for geological timescales. This process has been helping to regulate Earth's climate for millions of years, and understanding it is crucial for predicting how the planet will respond to increasing atmospheric CO2 levels. Despite its seemingly harsh conditions, the abyss is one of the most stable environments on our planet. While the surface waters experience seasons, storms, and daily temperature changes, the deep ocean maintains conditions that have remained essentially constant for millions of years. This stability has allowed evolution to explore adaptations that would be impossible in more variable environments. Many creatures in the abyss have evolved beyond the need for rapid movement or quick reflexes. In a world where food is scarce and predators are few, efficiency becomes more important than speed. Many fish here move with such slow, deliberate motions that they seem to be swimming through thick honey rather than water. Their entire lifestyle is optimized for energy conservation. The abyss is also where we're discovering new forms of life that challenge our understanding of biology itself. Recently, scientists have found bacteria and archaea living in the sediments that can survive on incredibly small amounts of energy, so small that they may represent the minimum energy requirements for life itself. These starving microorganisms may help us understand the limits of life and the possibilities for life on other planets. As we prepare to descend into the final zone, the deepest trenches of our planet, take a moment to appreciate the remarkable world of the abyss. Here, in conditions that seem impossibly harsh, life has found ways not just to survive, but to create entire ecosystems. The creatures here remind us that adaptation can take forms we never imagined, that beauty can exist in the most unexpected places, and that life's creativity knows no bounds. Feel yourself suspended in the abyss, surrounded by water so dense it almost seems solid, enveloped by darkness so complete that any spark of bioluminescence becomes a precious jewel. The pressure here would crush any surface creature instantly, yet you are held gently, safely, in the imagination, witnessing one of the most remarkable ecosystems our planet has ever created. The abyss teaches us about patience, about the value of scarcity, about the ways that life can slow down and still remain vibrantly, beautifully alive. It reminds us that the vast majority of our planet's living space exists in conditions we can barely imagine. Yet those conditions have nurtured some of the most remarkable adaptations and communities in the history of life on Earth. The Hadal depths mark Earth's final frontier of dreams and the ultimate test of life's ingenuity. And now, for our final descent, we leave even the abyss behind and venture into the deepest places our planet has to offer. The Hadal Pelagic Zone, named after Hades, the ancient Greek underworld, stretching from 6,000 meters down to the very deepest trenches at more than 11,000 meters below the surface. These are the Hadal depths, the final frontier, the deepest dreams our planet dreams in its oceanic sleep. Here, in the narrow trenches that cut like knife wounds into the ocean floor, we encounter pressures that defy comprehension. At the bottom of the Mariana Trench, the deepest place on Earth, the pressure reaches more than 1,100 times what we experience at sea level. It would feel like having the entire weight of a mountain pressing down on every square inch of your body, yet somehow, impossibly, life has found ways to exist, even here, in conditions so extreme they seem more suited to alien worlds than our gentle Earth. The trenches themselves are marvels of planetary architecture. The Mariana Trench, stretching for more than 2,500 kilometers across the Pacific, is deeper than Mount Everest is tall. If you could place the world's highest mountain in the world's deepest trench, its peak would still be more than 2 kilometers underwater. These trenches are formed where tectonic plates collide, where one piece of the Earth's crust slowly, patiently slides beneath another, creating these profound gashes in the ocean floor. The formation of these trenches is an ongoing process that has been shaping the ocean floor for hundreds of millions of years. As oceanic plates are forced down into the Earth's mantle, they create these deep valleys that serve as windows into the planet's interior processes. The trenches are not just deep holes in the seafloor. They are active geological features where the Earth is constantly remaking itself. The temperature here has reached its absolute minimum, 1 to 4 degrees Celsius, barely above freezing, a cold so deep and constant that it has become another defining characteristic of life itself. In this cold, all biological processes slow to an almost imperceptible pace. A creature's heartbeat might slow to once every few minutes, its metabolism reduced to the barest whisper necessary to maintain life. Some organisms here may live for centuries, their lives measured on timescales that dwarf human existence. The Hadal depths exist in darkness beyond anything we've encountered before, a darkness so profound that it seems to have substance, weight, presence. Yet even here in this deepest night, life creates its own light. Bacteria glow with bioluminescence, so faint it can barely be detected by the most sensitive instruments, yet to the creatures adapted to these depths, it might as well be bright as daylight. One of the most remarkable discoveries in the Hadal depths is that life exists not just in the water column, but in the sediments themselves. Deep beneath the trench floors, sometimes kilometers down into the Earth's crust, scientists have found bacteria and archaea living in the spaces between rock particles, feeding on chemicals that seep up from the planet's interior. These deep biosphere communities might represent some of the oldest forms of life on Earth, living in conditions that have remained essentially unchanged for billions of years. This deep biosphere extends far beyond what we previously imagined possible. Scientists have found living microorganisms at depths of several kilometers beneath the seafloor, in environments where the pressure is crushing, the temperature is near the limits of what life can tolerate, and the chemistry is utterly alien to surface conditions. These deep living organisms may represent a significant portion of all life on Earth, possibly equaling the biomass of all surface life combined. The creatures that live in the Hadal trenches are among the most specialized on our planet. Snailfish, translucent and delicate-looking, have been found at depths exceeding 8,000 meters, making them the deepest living fish ever discovered. Their bodies are more than 95% water, with just enough structure to maintain their shape under pressures that would collapse most living things. They move through the water like living ghosts, feeding on tiny crustaceans and bacteria in the sparse ecosystem of the deepest ocean. These snailfish have evolved remarkable adaptations to survive in the Hadal zone. Their proteins have been modified to remain stable under extreme pressure. In fact, some of their enzymes require the high pressure to function properly and would break down if brought to the surface. Their bones are barely calcified, more like cartilage, allowing them to compress and expand with pressure changes. It's as if they have become living liquid, perfectly adapted to existence in the most extreme pressures on Earth. Giant amphipods, relatives of beach fleas, but grown to the size of small dogs, scuttle across the floors of the deepest trenches. These armored scavengers have evolved to take advantage of the occasional bonanzas of food that fall into the trenches from above. They can detect the chemical signature of a dead fish or squid from miles away, and will converge on food sources like underwater vultures, their powerful jaws capable of stripping meat from bones with remarkable efficiency. Recent discoveries have revealed that some of these amphipods exhibit extreme longevity, possibly living for decades in the cold, high-pressure environment of the trenches. Their slow metabolisms and efficient body designs allow them to survive on very little food for extended periods. Some species have been found to have aluminum-based compounds in their bodies that help them cope with the extreme pressure, a completely unique adaptation found nowhere else in the animal kingdom. The Hadal zone is also where we find some of the most extreme examples of pressure adaptation. Proteins that would denature instantly at surface pressures have evolved to require the crushing depths to function properly. These deep-sea proteins are held together by molecular bonds so strong that they would be rigid and useless in the low pressures we consider normal. It's as if life has learned to use pressure itself as a tool for shaping the very chemistry of existence. Scientists have discovered that some Hadal bacteria produce special molecules called piezolites that help their cells cope with extreme pressure. These compounds act like molecular shock absorbers, preventing the cell membranes from collapsing under the enormous pressure. Some of these pressure-protecting molecules are found nowhere else in nature and may have applications for human technology in extreme environments. Perhaps most remarkably, the deepest trenches are not sterile environments but are actually more biologically active than the surrounding abyssal plains. The steep walls of the trenches channel organic matter down from the surface waters, creating a focusing effect that concentrates food in these deepest places. It's like a funnel system that ensures the deepest parts of the ocean receive a steady supply of nutrients from the world above. This funnel effect means that trenches can support surprisingly diverse communities despite their extreme conditions. The sloping walls create a variety of microhabitats, each with its own conditions of pressure, temperature, and food availability. Recent surveys have found that trenches often contain more species than the surrounding deep-sea areas, making them oases of biodiversity in the deep ocean. The walls of the trenches themselves create unique ecosystems. Along these steep slopes, bacterial mats form colorful carpets, brilliant whites, oranges, and yellows that seem impossibly vivid in the eternal darkness. These bacteria feed on the chemicals that seep from the trench walls, creating the foundation for entire communities of specialized creatures that exist nowhere else on Earth. In some trenches we find cold seeps, places where chemicals from deep within the Earth leak out through the seafloor, creating oases of chemosynthetic life. These seeps support communities of tube worms, clams, and mussels that live entirely on the chemical energy rising from the planet's interior. They're like underwater gardens blooming in the deepest darkness, sustained not by sunlight but by the Earth's own chemistry. These chemosynthetic communities represent one of the most remarkable discoveries in modern biology. Unlike virtually all other life on Earth, these organisms don't depend on sunlight, even indirectly. Instead, they harvest energy from chemical reactions involving hydrogen sulfide, methane, and other compounds that seep from the Earth's interior. It's a completely independent form of life that shows us alternative pathways for biological energy. The deepest trenches are also windows into the Earth's interior processes. The tectonic activity that creates these trenches also brings materials from deep within the planet to the surface, creating unique mineral environments that host specialized forms of life. Some bacteria found in the Hadal zone can metabolize minerals that are rare or absent in other parts of the ocean, creating ecosystems based on geology itself. Recent research has discovered that some Hadal bacteria can actually create their own dark oxygen through electrochemical processes involving metallic minerals on the seafloor. This discovery challenges our understanding of oxygen production on Earth and suggests that life may have access to energy sources we never imagined possible. These bacteria essentially act like living batteries, using the chemical potential energy stored in metal nodules to split water molecules and create oxygen. Time moves differently in the Hadal depths. The extreme pressure, cold, and scarcity of food have created conditions where life operates on timescales that seem almost geological. Some creatures here might live for centuries, growing and reproducing so slowly that their life cycles span multiple human generations. They exist in a different relationship with time itself, as patient as the trenches that created their habitat. The discovery of life in the Hadal zone has profound implications for our understanding of the limits of life itself. If organisms can survive in the deepest, most pressure-filled places on Earth, what does this tell us about the possibility of life in the deep oceans of other worlds? Jupiter's moon Europa, Saturn's moon Enceladus, and other ice-covered worlds in our solar system may have conditions similar to Earth's Hadal zone. The Hadal zone is also where we discover that the concept of empty space doesn't exist in the ocean. Even in the deepest, most seemingly barren parts of the trenches, every drop of water contains bacteria, viruses, and organic molecules. The ocean is alive throughout its entire volume, from surface to seafloor, from the brightest tropical shallows to the darkest abyssal depths. Recent expeditions to the deepest trenches have revealed that these environments are not isolated from the rest of the ocean, but are connected to global processes in ways we're only beginning to understand. Pollutants from the surface world, plastics, chemicals, radioactive materials, have been found in the deepest parts of the ocean, carried there by the same currents and processes that deliver food and oxygen to these remote communities. The discovery of microplastics in the deepest trenches has been one of the most sobering discoveries of modern oceanography. Even in places that have never been visited by humans, that are more isolated than the surface of Mars, we find evidence of human impact. These pollutants demonstrate the interconnected nature of our planet's systems and remind us that no place on Earth is truly untouched by human activity. The Hadal depths also play a crucial role in the planet's carbon cycle. Organic matter that falls into the deepest trenches can be buried in the sediments for millions of years, effectively removing carbon from the atmosphere and storing it in the Earth's crust. These deepest parts of the ocean may be some of the most important carbon sinks on our planet. Scientists estimate that the Hadal zone may sequester carbon at rates much higher than previously thought. The focusing effect of the trenches, combined with the slow decomposition rates at extreme depth, means that organic matter is more likely to be permanently buried here than in other parts of the ocean. This makes the Hadal zone a crucial component of Earth's climate system. Perhaps most humbling is the realization that we have explored less than 5% of the Hadal zone. Each expedition to these depths reveals new species, new ecosystems, new ways that life has adapted to the most extreme conditions our planet can offer. We are still discovering the basic facts about life in the deepest ocean, still learning about ecosystems that have been thriving in the darkness for millions of years. The recent discovery of Dulcibella camanchaca, a new predatory amphipod in the Atacama Trench, demonstrates that major discoveries are still being made in the Hadal zone. This large predator represents an entirely new evolutionary lineage adapted to the extreme conditions of the deepest ocean. Its discovery suggests that many more unknown species are waiting to be found in the world's deepest places. The creatures of the Hadal Zone remind us that life is far more creative, far more persistent, and far more adaptable than we ever imagined. They show us that no environment is too extreme, no conditions too challenging, for life to find ways not just to survive but to thrive. In the deepest, darkest, most pressure-filled places on our planet, life has created communities as complex and beautiful as any coral reef. The Hadal depths are also reminders of how much we still don't know about our own planet. While we've mapped the surfaces of other planets and moons, the deepest parts of our own ocean remain largely mysterious. Each dive to these depths is like launching a space mission to an alien world, except that alien world is part of our own home. Recent technological advances are finally beginning to make regular exploration of the Hadal Zone possible. New pressure-resistant cameras, sensors, and sampling equipment can now operate at the crushing depths of the deepest trenches, revealing details about these extreme environments that were impossible to study before. We are entering a new age of Hadal exploration. As we complete our journey through the ocean's depths, rising slowly back toward the surface, take a moment to appreciate the remarkable progression we've experienced. From the familiar, sun-warmed surface waters through the twilight zone's gentle transition into darkness, from the midnight zone's bioluminescent displays, to the abyss's patient communities, and finally to the Hadal depths' extreme adaptations, we've witnessed the full spectrum of life's creativity in the face of Earth's most challenging conditions. The ocean's depths teach us about patience, about adaptation, about the incredible diversity of ways that life can exist and thrive. They remind us that our planet is far more complex, far more alive, and far more mysterious than we often realize in our surface-dwelling daily lives. Feel yourself rising slowly through these layers, each one a different world, each one a different dream that our planet dreams in the vast blue space of its oceans. From the crushing pressures of the deepest trenches through the patient communities of the abyss, from the bioluminescent displays of the midnight zone through the productive twilight waters, and finally back to the familiar warmth and light of the surface waters. You are returning from a journey to places that exist on our own planet, yet feel as alien and wonderful as any science fiction could imagine. The ocean's depths are Earth's way of showing us that life is endlessly creative, endlessly persistent, and endlessly capable of finding beauty and community in even the most seemingly impossible conditions. The gentle return arising through layers of dreams and memory. And now, as all good journeys must, ours draws to a gentle close as we rise slowly, peacefully, through the layers of the ocean's depths, carrying with us the memories of wonders we've witnessed in the planet's deepest dreams. Like surfacing from the most profound sleep, we emerge from these depths with a new understanding of the world that exists beneath the familiar waves. As we ascend through the Hadal Zone one last time, past the giant amphipods and the translucent snailfish, past the bacterial mats that bloom in impossible colors on the trench walls, past the chemosynthetic gardens that thrive on the Earth's own chemistry, we carry with us the knowledge that even in the deepest, most extreme places our planet can create, life finds ways not just to exist, but to form communities, to create beauty, to persist with a patience that measures time in geological ages. Rising through the abyss, past the sea pigs wandering across the soft sediments in their eternal herds, past the glass sponges building their translucent cathedrals, one microscopic layer at a time, past the tripod fish standing motionless in their eternal vigil, past the whale falls that create temporary oases of abundance in the deep desert. We understand now that the vast majority of our planet's living space exists in conditions we can barely imagine, yet those conditions have nurtured some of the most remarkable adaptations in the history of life on Earth. Ascending through the midnight zone, past the bioluminescent displays that paint the darkness with living light, past the anglerfish with their glowing lures and patient hunting strategies, past the vampire squid with their gentle feeding on marine snow, past the giant squid that patrol these depths like living submarines, we realize that darkness is not the absence of life, but simply a different stage for life's most creative performances. Here we learned that scarcity breeds innovation, that pressure creates adaptations we never dreamed possible. Climbing through the twilight zone, past the lanternfish with their organized nightly migrations, past the siphonophores stringing their transparent colonies through the blue-green water, past the jellies pulsing through the last filtered rays of sunlight, past the vertical migrators that create one of the largest movements of life on Earth. We appreciate the transition zones, the places where daydreams of becoming night, where familiar transforms into mysterious. And finally, breaking through into the sunlight zone, feeling the warmth of solar energy on our imagined skin, seeing the full spectrum of colors returning to the water around us, watching dolphins arc through the waves and seabirds dive from the bright world above, seeing the phytoplankton that produce the very oxygen we breathe, we return to the familiar surface world with new eyes, new appreciation for the thin layer of warmth and light that makes life as we know it possible. But we return changed by our journey. We now know that beneath every wave that laps at a beach, beneath every sunset reflected on calm water, beneath every storm that stirs the surface seas, there exist layer upon layer of worlds within worlds, each with its own communities, its own challenges, its own remarkable solutions to the problem of existence. We've learned that our blue planet is far bluer than we ever imagined, that the ocean covers not just the majority of the Earth's surface, but that it extends down through layers of depth that dwarf our highest mountains, creating living spaces that stretch through vertical miles of water column. We've discovered that life has filled every available niche in this vast three-dimensional habitat, from the sun-warmed surface to the pressure-crushed depths. We've witnessed bioluminescence that rivals any earthly light display, pressure adaptations that seem to defy physics, feeding strategies that make the most of extreme scarcity, and communities that thrive in conditions we would consider impossible. We've seen that patience can be a way of life, that slowness can be a form of efficiency, that darkness can be a canvas for the most beautiful art. We've discovered the wonder of deep-sea gigantism, where the cold and the scarcity and the pressure combine to create creatures that grow to sizes impossible in the surface waters. We've learned about chemosynthesis, where life creates energy from chemistry rather than sunlight, showing us that biology is far more creative than we ever imagined. We've seen how marine snow connects the surface to the depths, how whale falls create temporary kingdoms in the deep desert, how the thermal layers of the ocean create barriers and highways for life. We've learned about the ocean's role as a climate regulator, how the deep waters store carbon for thousands of years, how the great currents carry heat around the planet, how the chemical balance of the sea affects the composition of the atmosphere itself. We've discovered that the ocean's depths are not just remote alien environments, but active participants in the planetary systems that make Earth habitable. The ocean's depths have taught us about time itself, about geological time that measures change in millions of years, about biological time that adapts to the rhythms of scarcity and abundance, about ecological time that connects the surface productivity to the deep-sea communities through the gentle, constant rain of marine snow. We've learned that the familiar surface world we know is intimately connected to these deep realms through currents that circle the globe, through the vertical migrations that move more biomass than any other migration on Earth, through the chemical cycles that connect the atmosphere to the deepest trenches through the medium of water itself. We've discovered the sobering reality that human influence reaches even to the deepest places, that microplastics and other pollutants have found their way to trenches deeper than Everest, is tall, reminding us that we are connected to every part of our planet's system, that our actions have consequences even in places we have never seen. We've learned about recent discoveries that are revolutionizing our understanding of life itself: the dark oxygen produced by bacteria on the deep sea floor, the vast communities of microorganisms living kilometers beneath the ocean floor, the discovery of new species in every expedition to the deep sea. We've realized that we are still in the early days of exploring our own planet, that major discoveries await in the depths. Perhaps most importantly, we've discovered that there is still so much we don't know about our own planet. The ocean's depths remain one of the last frontiers of exploration on Earth, holding secrets that may change our understanding of life itself. Every expedition to the deep sea reveals new species, new ecosystems, new ways that life has learned to exist in conditions we never imagined possible. As you settle back into your comfortable surroundings, as your breathing returns to its normal rhythm, as the familiar world of dry land and atmospheric pressure reasserts itself around you, carry with you the knowledge that you live on a planet far more wonderful, far more complex, and far more alive than most people ever realize. The next time you see the ocean, whether from a beach, from a ship, or even just in a photograph, remember the layers upon layers of life that exist beneath that familiar surface. Remember the bioluminescent displays, painting the darkness with living light, the patient creatures waiting in the eternal night for their next meal, the communities that have thrived for millions of years in conditions that would challenge our imagination. Remember the glass sponges growing their crystal cathedrals over millennia, the sea pigs wandering in herds across the abyssal plains, the snailfish moving like ghosts through the Haddle trenches, the chemosynthetic gardens blooming around hydrothermal vents. Remember that every part of this vast ocean is alive, that life has found ways to exist in every possible niche. Remember that every drop of water in every ocean has been part of this vast circulation system, carrying nutrients from the surface to the depths, carrying life from the shallows to the abyss, connecting every part of the ocean to every other part in a global system of currents and chemistry that makes our planet habitable. The ocean's depths are not just distant, alien environments. They are part of the same system that regulates our climate, produces our oxygen, and makes life on Earth possible. The phytoplankton in the sunlight zone produce much of the oxygen we breathe. The deep currents distribute heat around the globe, moderating our climate. The deep-sea organisms process organic matter in ways that affect the chemistry of the entire planet. Tonight, as you drift off to sleep, you might imagine yourself gently floating in the peaceful depths we've explored together. Feel the pressure of the deep water holding you safely. See the bioluminescent displays twinkling around you like underwater stars. Sense the patient rhythms of creatures that have learned to make every moment count, every calorie precious. Dream of glass sponges growing their crystal cathedrals over centuries, of giant squid moving like living submarines through the midnight depths, of bacteria creating light where no sunlight has ever reached, of communities of creatures that have never known anything but the gentle pressure of the abyss, the constant cold of the deep, the eternal darkness that blooms with its own forms of life. Dream of the seamounts rising like underwater mountains from the abyssal plains, of the trenches cutting like canyons deeper than any land formation, of the chemical gardens blooming around volcanic vents, of the whale falls creating temporary kingdoms in the deep desert. The ocean's depths have been patient for millions of years, slowly revealing their secrets to those curious enough to look, gentle enough to listen, quiet enough to appreciate the subtle beauties of life adapted to extremes. They will continue to be patient, continue to hold their mysteries, continue to nurture their remarkable communities long after our own small lives have ended. But for now, for tonight, you've been there with them. You've witnessed the ocean's deepest dreams, explored the planet's most hidden places, discovered worlds that exist right here on Earth, yet feel as alien and wonderful as any science fiction could imagine. You've learned that your planet is far more alive, far more creative, and far more beautiful than you may have ever realized. Sleep well, fellow explorer of the deep blue world. Let the gentle rhythms of the ocean's depths carry you into your own peaceful dreams, knowing that you live on a planet where life has learned to exist in the most impossible places, to create beauty in the darkest depths, and to thrive in conditions that challenge everything we thought we knew about the limits of life itself. The ocean dreams, and now you dream with it, both of you held safely in the vast, patient embrace of water and time, pressure and darkness, life and the endless creativity that makes existence possible in even the deepest, most challenging places our beautiful blue planet has to offer. Rest well, and let the deep ocean's patience teach you about the gentle, persistent power of life itself. Sweet dreams from the depths of the sea, where pressure becomes poetry, darkness becomes light, and the impossible becomes simply another way that life learns to dance with the conditions it finds. The ocean keeps all its promises, holds all its secrets safely, and continues its patient work of nurturing life in places we're only beginning to understand. Sleep now, cradled by the knowledge that you live on a planet more wonderful, more mysterious, and more alive than dreams could ever fully capture.